with the second part. Okay, that is talking about the punishments that we have got in this particular chapter. Okay, the provisions relating to punishments that we have got in this particular chapter. Okay, only two sections are there. Only two sections. One is section number 447 and the other one is section number 450. Okay, 447 and 450. Both the sections are simple and both the sections are important as well. Okay, especially 447, because 447 reference we have seen at many places, and the section is also really important from law point of view as well as from audit point of view. Yes. Okay, so now just try to understand everyone here. I am taking up section number 447 first. Okay, 450 is a miscellaneous section. 447 we'll just take up first. 447 talks about punishment for fraud. Okay, it talks about punishment for fraud. Ma'am, means what? Okay, punishment for fraud means if any particular person is convicted, okay, he has been held guilty of a particular fraud, of any particular fraud, and if that section redirects you to section number 447, then this punishment is going to be applicable. Okay, one example which I can give you is the chapters. In the previous chapter, we had done about this inspection, inquiry and investigation. In that, the last section, section number 229, said that if you are purposely providing any false information, any false documents, etc., 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 and you know that it is false, then you will be liable for fraud under section 447. We had done something like that. So 229 is redirecting us to section number 447. So at that time, this particular section is going to be applicable, right? So now what are we supposed to see? Okay, first what are we supposed to find out? We should find out that how much is the amount involved in the fraud. Okay, how much is the amount involved in the fraud? That is the first thing that we should be finding it out. Okay. Now suppose if the amount involved in the fraud, okay, if the amount involved in the fraud is at least, means it is more than or equal to 10 lakh or 1% of the turnover of that particular company, out of these two, whichever is lower. Okay, you would be having the turnover of the company, take 1% of that or 10 lakhs, out of these two, take whichever is lower. If this much is the amount, if at least this much amount was involved in the fraud, means you have done a big fraud. Okay, means you have done what? Means you have done a big fraud. Okay, example, turnover of the company is, say for example, 1 crore rupees. Okay, turnover, for example, turnover of the company is 1 crore. So 1% of 1 crore is going to give me 1 lakh rupee. So 10 lakh or 1 lakh, whichever is lower. So 10 lakh or 1 lakh, whichever is lower, comes to 1 lakh. Okay, now check how much is the amount involved in the fraud. Suppose if the amount involved in the fraud is 5 lakh rupees, means can I say you have crossed the threshold, you have at least touched the threshold of 1 lakh rupee, means you have done a big fraud. Okay, means you have done a big fraud. Now say for example, if you have done a big fraud, okay, then in that case, what is the punishment applicable on you? The punishment applicable on you is imprisonment and fine. Okay, if I'm using the word imprisonment and fine, by this time you already know that imprisonment and fine means it is non-compoundable, because imprisonment is mandatorily going to happen there. So imprisonment of minimum period of 6 months and which can go up to 10 years. Okay, which can go up to 10 years. That is one thing. Okay, and fine is minimum, the amount which was involved in the fraud. In our case, I had given the example of 5 lakhs. So amount involved in the fraud which can go up to 3 times the amount involved in the fraud. So there's a range. Okay, there's a range. And since this is a punishment, this will be determined by the special court. Right? The case will be taken up by the special court. Did you understand this? Yes. And one small addition that they do here is, if suppose the fraud which is involved here, if it involves public interest. Okay, if the fraud involves public interest, means because of this particular fraud, the public interest has been affected. If the public interest has been affected, then in that case, I'll write it with another ring. The minimum period of imprisonment, instead of 6 months, it is going to be 3 years. So in that case, everything else will remain the same, just that imprisonment will range between 3 years to 10 years and fine will range between amount involved in the fraud up to 3 times the amount involved in the fraud, only if public interest is involved. Did you get this, everyone? Yes. So first of all, this is your limit. Okay, first of all, this is your limit. Check whether your fraud has touched this limit. If yes, means you have done a big fraud. Okay, if yes, then you have done a big fraud. And if you have done a big fraud, then this is the punishment that will be applicable on you. Okay, ma'am, what if we have done a small fraud? That is, the amount of fraud that we have done is less than this particular limit. Then what? Then in that case, okay, so what are they telling? If the amount involved in fraud is lesser than limit. Ma'am, what is the limit? You only tell me. Is lesser than limit means what? Lesser than 10 lakh or 1% of the turnover of the company, whichever is lower. Okay, if the amount involved in fraud is lesser than this, and plus there is no public interest that is involved. Okay, there is no public interest that is involved. Okay, then in that case, both the conditions must be fulfilled. Okay, means I have done a small fraud and public has not got affected because of that. Then in that case, you will be punishable with imprisonment, which can go up to 5 years, means 0 to 5 years, or fine will be up to rupees 50 lakhs. Okay, fine will be up to rupees 50 lakhs or both. So now tell me, is it compoundable or is it non-compoundable? Okay, imprisonment or fine or both. Tell me, is it compoundable or is it non-compoundable? So this is compoundable because your imprisonment is not mandatory, right? Imprisonment is not mandatory. Okay, but when will this be applicable? This will be applicable when you have done a smaller fraud and it does not involve public interest. So ma'am, doubt. What if it involves public interest? Okay, what if it involves public interest? Then 447 is not applicable. Okay, then in that case, see, generally what happens, one thinking is that way, that if public interest is involved, then definitely the amount involved in the fraud will be more. So you'll automatically fall in the first point. Okay, but say for example, if such hypothetical situation arises, amount involved in the fraud is very less, but it involves public interest, then 447 is not applicable there. Okay, then you will fall in the miscellaneous section, means for which there is no punishment provided, that is section number 450. Did you understand this? Yes. And in the first case, if public interest is involved, then there was only one small change, rest everything remained the same, that minimum period of imprisonment will be 3. Very, very clear with this, everyone? Yes. So this is, they are telling that this is the provision of section 447, and for your reference, we have just taken the definition of the term fraud also. Okay, fraud means anything which is done in relation to a company or a body corporate, which involves, where we have, taken some undue advantage, where we have caused some injury to the public interest, where we have caused injury to the interest of the creditors, shareholders, and we have done some wrongful gain, etc. If such a situation arises, then we can say that yes, a fraud has been committed. Okay, so you can just read, just read this definition once, but what is more important here is what is the punishment. Okay, what is the punishment for fraud under section 447? Very clear with this? Yes, so this is the definition of fraud for the purpose of section number 447. I hope I am very, very clear with this. Yes. So these are the two. First one is when we have done a bigger fraud. Okay, and second one when we have done a smaller fraud. Okay, bigger than what or smaller than what? Bigger than the limit or smaller than the limit. Okay, then in that case, respective punishment is going to be applicable. Very clear with this? Yes. Okay. So this was all about your section number 447. Okay, this was all about your section number 447. And now going on to the next section, that is section number 450. Okay, section number 450. This is a section where there is no specific, okay, for which there is no penalty or no punishment provided. Okay, this is something for which this section will be applicable when there is no penalty or punishment is provided. Okay, so suppose if there is any particular company, or if there is any officer of the company, etc., and if these people have done some any type of contravention for which there is no penalty or punishment that is provided in the act, then in that case we need a miscellaneous section, penalty punishment coming up there. So that will be section number 450. So in such case, that person will be liable for a penalty. Okay, such a case, that person will be liable for a penalty flat. Okay, flat rupees 10,000. And if it continues further, means even after giving warning, etc., if it continues further, then in that case, there will be a further penalty. Okay, there will be a further penalty for rupees 1,000 per day. Okay, further penalty of rupees 1,000 per day for which the contravention continues, but there is a cap. Okay, there is a overall cap. Okay, there will be an overall cap on the company. There will be a cap of maximum rupees 2 lakh under section 450. Finally, maximum on the company you can levy up to rupees 2 lakh, and on the defaulting person or the defaulting officer in charge, etc., there will be a maximum amount of rupees 50,000. Means even after considering this, it cannot overall go above these limits. Okay, but this is miscellaneous. Means if there is any such default done for which there is no penalty also provided, on for which there is no punishment also provided in the entire company law, okay, in the entire company law, then in that case this particular section is going to be applicable. Okay, just like I gave you the example of 447. Suppose if we have done a smaller fraud, okay, suppose if we have done a smaller fraud but it involves public interest, then this will be applicable because that was not provided for in section number 447. Very clear with this, everyone? Yes. Okay, fine. Okay. So this was all about your punishments part. Okay, this was all about your punishments part.